There is a bird in your yard right now that knows your face. Your face, the specific arrangement of your features, the way you carry your shoulders when you walk, the particular rhythm of how your weight shifts from heel to toe. At least one bird that visits your yard has been building a file on you specifically since the first week you started filling it. Probably more than one. I know how that sounds. I thought the same thing when I first came across the research. I've been feeding birds in my little suburban yard in Northern Virginia for about 5 years now. And for most of that time, I assumed the relationship was basically a vending machine transaction. I load seed, birds come to seed, birds leave, I reload. Simple. Transactional. It isn't. Because here's what most people don't know, and what I didn't know until I started reading the actual science. By the time you walked to your back door this morning, every bird in your yard that knows your routine had already been making decisions about you. Not about humans, not about a person, about you, specifically. The face, the schedule, the sound of your footsteps, the light from your window at the exact time you get up. All of it had already been processed before your hand touched the door handle. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave. Today, we're going through 8 things your backyard birds are reading about you before you ever open that door. Stay until number 8. I've tried to explain number 8 to my wife twice. I still can't do it cleanly. I'll try here. Let's start with something that happened before your alarm even went off this morning. Number 1. They heard your alarm, or something close to it. Your house, from the outside, is not silent. Through exterior walls, through the small gaps around windows, through the ventilation points and the gap where the cable line comes in near the foundation, your house leaks sound. Not much, but birds don't need much. The research on this, building out of Cornell's lab of ornithology through years of feeder watch data, has tracked a consistent pattern. Birds that regularly visit a specific feeder begin staging, flying to branches near the feeder, increasing contact calls, orienting toward the house, about 8 to 10 minutes before their regular feeder actually appears outside, not after the door opens, before they were already positioned. What drives the staging? The best answer the research gives us: birds register sudden ambient sound changes in patterns they have learned to associate with human activity. Your alarm goes off at 6:40. The house has been quiet. Then it isn't. The cardinal in the holly bush, 45 grams, the weight of a golf ball, doesn't know what an alarm clock is, but she has learned that a particular kind of abrupt sound change at a certain time of morning reliably means the feeder gets filled within 20 minutes. So she starts moving toward it. This is called anticipatory behavior. They're not responding to the food. They're responding to the signal that the food is coming. And the signal they've learned to read is you, being predictably human. I used to think I was doing them a favor by keeping a consistent schedule. It turns out they're the ones enforcing it. Number 2. They've learned your window. This one took me a while to understand because it requires thinking about what a window looks like from the outside. Inside your house in the morning, a light coming on in the bedroom is just a light coming on. From outside in the dark, that window is something else entirely. Birds see differently than we do. Most songbirds are tetrachromatic. They have 4 types of cone cells in their eyes compared to our 3. That 4th cone is sensitive to ultraviolet light, a frequency we cannot perceive. What this means for your window is that the light spilling from your bedroom at 6:40 in the morning, from a bird's perspective, contains information you have no access to. The color temperature, the UV signature of your specific bulb, the shadow pattern as you move across the room, all of it is visible to them in more dimensions than we can measure. Researchers at the University of Exeter, studying flight initiation distance in urban birds, found that anticipatory positioning near feeders often begins before a human appears at the door or window, and before any sound cue is possible. The leading candidate for the trigger is exactly this. Light shifts at windows that specific birds have learned to associate with a specific person's morning. Your bedroom light comes on. Chickadees, 11 grams, the weight of 2 pennies, shift in the branches outside. Not because they can see you yet, not because the door is opened, because they know what that light means. Last winter, I went through a few weeks of sleeping later than usual. The feeder staging pattern at my squid cage was clearly off during those weeks, not permanently, but the morning rhythm had recalibrated. They'd been tracking my light. When I stopped producing it on schedule, they adjusted. There's something a little disorienting about that. Not bad disorienting. More like the feeling when you realize someone has been paying more attention to you than you knew. Number 3, they feel you moving. Not hear, feel. Ground-feeding birds, mourning doves, dark-eyed juncos, the white-breasted nuthatch that spirals down the trunk and picks through whatever falls below the feeder, are highly sensitive to low-frequency vibrations through the substrate. A mourning dove weighs between 4 and 6 ounces. It feeds on the ground, and the ground carries information. Research on vibration sensitivity in ground-feeding birds shows they can distinguish between vibration signatures from different animals at distances of several feet through solid substrate. Your footfall has a specific pattern, the way your weight distributes from heel to toe, your pace interval, your stride length. That pattern is yours. It's different from your partner's, different from the mail carrier's, different from the neighbor walking their dog past the fence. The mourning doves on my back patio respond differently when I walk toward the back door than when I walk toward the kitchen. Same house, different trajectory. They've mapped it. Last spring, when both my wife and I were working from home, I watched this play out over several months. When she moved toward the back of the house, the doves stayed. When I did, they flushed. She hadn't startled them repeatedly the way I had. They'd built separate files on each of us, based on footfall alone. They feel who's coming before the door opens. Number 4, they know your face. This is where the science gets uncomfortably specific. You think the birds in your yard notice you the way you notice background noise. Present, registered, not particularly processed. I thought the same thing for a long time. Nearly everything I assumed turned out to be wrong. Here's the research. Work coming out of the University of Washington, led by Dr. John Marsluff and his colleagues, documented something that, when first published, seemed extraordinary, but is now a well-established finding. American crows recognize individual human faces. They remember those faces for years. They communicate threat assessments of specific individuals to other crows who were not present at the original incident. The research used subjects wearing specific masks during controlled interactions with crows, and the birds responded not to the mask as a category, but to that specific face's threat history. Years later, transferred socially. Crows are corvids. They are remarkable. But here's where it gets significantly less comfortable. Individual recognition of humans isn't limited to corvids. Studies on blue jays, tufted titmice, and black-capped chickadees all showed differential behavior toward individual humans. Different FID responses, different alarm intensities, different willingness to approach. FID is flight initiation distance, the distance at which a bird decides you're close enough to be a threat and departs. Research from the University of Exeter found that FID for the same species can vary by up to 30% depending on which specific human is approaching. It has nothing to do with how big you are or how fast you walk. They are reacting to your specific identity. Your yardbirds have a file on you. I learned this in a specific way. I've mentioned before that the Tuesday couple, the chickadee pair that's been visiting my feeders for 4 winters in my yard, flushed every time I wore a particular orange jacket for months after I disturbed a fledgling near the Japanese maple. I eventually tested it. Different jacket, different hat. I looked different. They flushed anyway. I took the hat off and stood still. They came back. It wasn't the jacket they were tracking. You haven't been watching them. You've been watched, with more attention and more persistence than you probably knew to feel flattered by. I want to stay with that for a second before we move to number 5, because you've been watched can sound like the wrong thing if you hear it wrong. The way I hear it now, after 5 years of paying attention out that back window, there are small wild animals in your yard that considered you worth studying. That's not surveillance, that's relationship. And what comes next in this video only makes sense because of that. Number 5, they've memorized your exact schedule. I mean exact. The Tuesday couple, The chickadee pair I've been watching for 4 winters now show up reliably between 7:35 and 7:50 on weekday mornings. That's roughly when I come down for my first coffee. I didn't notice the overlap for almost a year. I assumed they were just morning birds doing morning things. Then, last November, I was traveling for a week, and my wife was handling the feeders. She gets up earlier than I do and moves through the house differently. The Tuesday couple started showing up later, not chaotically, later, shifted by about 40 minutes, close to when she normally made it to the kitchen. The research on this from the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology confirms what that travel week suggested. Well-conditioned feeder birds don't learn morning in the abstract. They learn specific time frames associated with specific people. The precision window in birds that have been observing a consistent feeder can be as narrow as 3 to 5 minutes around that person's expected appearance time. Not the sunrise time. Your time. The signal they've locked onto isn't the sun. What this means is that somewhere inside those 11-gram birds, there is a representation of when I specifically tend to appear. Not a human. Me. And they've arranged their morning around it. I've started thinking of that as a kind of compliment. I don't know what else to call it. Number 6. They tell each other about you. This is the one that forces you to rethink your entire yard. Birds share information across species. It's called heterospecific eavesdropping, and it means that when a chickadee gives a high-intensity alarm, the blue jays, the titmice, the nuthatches, the cardinals, the mourning doves, the robins working the back of the lawn, they all update their behavior in response. They've learned each other's alarm systems. Your yard, at any given morning, is running a distributed information network across every species present. What the research is increasingly suggesting is that this cross-species communication can carry information not just about predator type, but about specific individual humans. Crow studies document it explicitly. When a crow that has a negative history with a specific person gives a threat response to that person, nearby crows that have never encountered them also begin responding. The information moves. After the orange jacket incident, after months of the Tuesday couple flushing specifically from me, I noticed the titmice were also skittish around me in ways they hadn't been before. I hadn't done anything to them. But they'd been listening. They'd updated their model of me based on what they observed the chickadees doing in my presence. You have a reputation in your yard. It exists across species. Every bird that observes a chickadee alarm in response to you adds a data point to a shared model of who you are. If that model is mostly calm and predictable, you benefit from it in ways you never consciously organized. If it includes a disturbance event, the information spreads farther than you'd expect. I want to be clear about something here because I spent a few weeks feeling guilty over the orange jacket situation. The model updates. The Tuesday couple came back. The titmice settled. What you're building every calm morning at the window is going into the file too. Number 7. Something changes the moment you decide to get up. This is the one that feels like it shouldn't be true. Research on avian response to human movement, work from the University of Exeter and parallel studies on urban bird behavior in Japan, suggests that birds don't just respond to overt movement. They respond to the micro-signals that come before movement begins. The pre-motion cues. The shift in your center of gravity before your feet follow. The change in shoulder angle when you orient toward the door. The difference in your posture between watching and about to move. Birds take in visual information at a temporal resolution roughly twice that of humans. Where you and I perceive smooth, continuous motion, they can break it into individual frames. What this means practically is that by the time you've consciously decided to walk toward the feeder, before you've taken a step, your body has already announced the intention in a language your yardbirds have been reading for years. This is not intuition on their part. It is physics, applied to an animal that has been attending to the world at a resolution we don't quite match. I've watched this informally from my kitchen window for a few years now. If I'm standing still, watching the Tuesday couple at the feeder, and I form the decision internally to move, just the intention, no physical action yet, they shift. Not always, not dramatically, but enough that I started paying attention to it, and enough that when I found the research, I had something to hang the observation on. What I keep coming back to is this. When you're standing at that window, you are not a passive observer. You are an animal, fully visible to other animals that have been calibrating their responses to you specifically for as long as you've lived in that yard. And they are better at reading animal bodies than you are at hiding inside one. Number 8. The thing I can't fully explain. I've saved this one for last because it has to be last. Everything else in this video has a mechanism I can point to, a study, a university, a name. Number 8 doesn't, at least not completely, and I think that's worth sitting with rather than filing away. It was a Tuesday in January, not this past January. The one before it, 6:42 in the morning. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone immediately after, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I had woken up early, not because of the alarm. It hadn't gone off. I got up and walked to the kitchen quietly. It wasn't the bedroom light. I hadn't turned it on. It wasn't the alarm. It hadn't gone off. It wasn't the sound of footsteps on the patio. I hadn't opened the door. And when I got to the kitchen window, in the dark, at 6:42 in the morning, 2 hours before they ever normally appear, the Tuesday couple was there, at the squid cage, already there. I'm not going to tell you I have a clean explanation for that morning. I've looked, and I don't think the science I've been describing in this video covers it, not completely. The light cue wasn't there. The sound cue wasn't there. The schedule wasn't there. And yet, I'm also not going to tell you it means what part of me wanted it to mean, which is something I don't have clean words for. I'm not going to tell you yes. I'm not going to tell you no. What I can tell you is what I've been sitting with ever since. There are wild animals in your yard that have built a specific model of you. Your face, your light, your footfall, your schedule, your reputation across species. You are a known thing to them, a specific presence they've decided is worth tracking. Whether what happened at 6:42 on that January morning fits inside that explanation or sits just outside it, I honestly don't know. I keep coming back to the fact that they were there. There is a bird in your yard right now that knows your face. I said that at the start of this video as a way into the science. I want to close with it differently, not as a setup, but as a fact about your life, about the yard you walk into every morning, about what has already been noticed and processed before your hand touches the door handle. The birds that come to your feeders are not waiting for a person, they're waiting for you. They've adjusted their morning around yours. They've filed your light, your footfall, your schedule, your face, your track record across species. And depending on how long you've been standing at that window and watching the yard quietly, you may have a better reputation out there than you know. If you're the kind of person who stands at the kitchen window in the early morning and watches the yard come back to life, you already know what I'm pointing at. That quiet two-way thing that doesn't have a name. Leave it in the comments if something like this has happened to you. I read everyone. And honestly, these are the stories I keep the longest. See you out there.